Good morning. This is Karen with New Cleveland Radio, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. Now, today's subject um, may really upset a lot of people. And I'm not bringing it to you to upset you, but to share the reality of what home care might be like. There are a lot of very good home care companies in in our state and around. But 5 years ago, my mother had a stroke. I went up to Michigan to live with her for the last 2.5 months of her life. And we had home aides in and out of the house the whole time. We had some excellent people taking care of my mother, actually, even taking care of me since I had moved from Cleveland to Detroit for those 2.5 months. But we also had other agencies that sent people who just were not fit to be caregivers. Not only didn't they treat my mother right, they didn't treat my family right. The difference is when you call the company and you share the information, what they will do for you or what they don't do for you. So the other day, I was on Facebook and I read this post, and Cal DeJulius, I have to tell you, I was crying. You're 24 years old. You're trying to get the best care for your grandmother. What 24-year-old in today's world is being responsible for a grandparent like you? And the care, it sounds like, was not appropriate. And the conversations with you were not appropriate. And so when I read it and I felt the tears just rolling off my face, I contacted you not knowing anything about you or your family. I've since done a little research, and you have a very prominent family. So I don't think you would have put that out there if there wasn't truth to it. Just prior to this recording, I got a phone call, and I just shared that with Cal. Somebody who would not identify themselves suggested we not do this podcast. I'm not going to let anybody threaten me. I'm not going to say what side I'm on, but the reality is I'm on the side of being fair and honest. So, Cal, give us a little bit of background. How did this all come about that you put out this post?
Well, and to your point, you know, sharing what I'm going to share today and what I shared on Facebook isn't something that's very exciting to share, and it also opens a lot of previous traumas that I've experienced, in my life and my family's life. So these aren't things that I really ever want to talk about. The only reasons that I did bring this up and that I was willing to chat about this is because I don't want anyone else to ever be in the situation that I am in. Because as you said, finding care workers, it's not only is it the most desperate and vulnerable time for the patient, the elderly, the sister, the mother, whatever it is, but it's the most vulnerable, desperate time for the person trying to find the care. And often it's a tremendous expense, and people are making a lot of sacrifices, as you mentioned, moving back and forth between Detroit and Cleveland. I mean, and this is a situation that isn't unique to just me. This is
Right.
very normal. Um, but what I shared on, let me give you some context. So, um, 2 months ago, June 11th, my grandmother, she was living in Houston, Texas, with her daughter, my mother's sister. Um, my mom passed when I was younger, 11, and so her sister is the only other sibling, and so she was living in Houston. My grandma quickly moved there after 5 years ago, and my grandma was living alone, but then ended up having a surgery and moved in with my aunt. Um, there was a crazy, unfortunate domestic violence situation where my grandmother and her daughter, my aunt, were shot by their um, son-in-law and step-grandson. Actually, they were shot by the step-grandson, but the whole um, domestic violence situation that ensued, it's really hard to point fingers anywhere.
Sure.
By the grace of God, for some reason, my grandmother was physically unharmed. It doesn't make any sense. She was shot in the head 2 times. And she today is
Wow.
completely physically from that event, completely unharmed. My aunt had, she just was released from the ICU maybe 2 weeks ago, but she's living too. Both the men took their own lives. But to me, it seems as if this probably wasn't an isolated domestic violence incident. So the only way that I look at it is kind of like they were able to get free, right?
Right.
Um, so overnight, my father, who was my grandmother's son-in-law, um, him and I flew out to Houston. We, tried our best to deal with the situation. My dad works full time, obviously, and he's been incredibly generous by supporting his mother-in-law, even though his wife is deceased. And so, that's huge. That's the biggest gift ever.
Sure.
But I moved my grandmother here. My aunt was still in the ICU, so I was going back and forth, trying to handle like all sorts of logistical things. They had a rental property. It was $26,000 to clean the rental property. It was insane. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what level of care my grandmother needed. If you talked to my aunt 2 weeks before, she couldn't walk. I have learned that that's not the situation. However, I wonder if being in a safe environment has just really done wonders for her healthcare needs.
Sure.
Um, and so I was looking for care, and I moved my grandmother into an apartment downtown below me, not forever, but my dad's house has stairs, and this apartment was right below me, and I was able to work out some month-to-month thing. And so I contacted this company that somebody had referred. I think I reached out to somebody who works with my dad and asked them, who should I go to for care? And transparently, I did not do any research. Like, I was desperate. I needed somebody overnight. I didn't know if it was covered by Medicare, Medicaid. I didn't look into any of that. I figured, which is exactly what I did, but I would try it out. And if it wasn't good, I would move on.
Right.
However, I did know the name of Nadine Glatley, who owns the company. She had went to beauty school with my dad, um, 30 years ago at this point. I don't even know.
Yeah.
um, my dad will kill me for saying his age. So, so I don't know how long ago that was. Both of them don't practice in behind the chair. Um, but I knew the name, and I knew she was a client of my parents' spas. And so I figured, you know what, honestly, like, it's a trustworthy people. It's a
Sure.
small city, as we know, and I couldn't imagine. And in the text threads that we had, um, she seemed like she wanted to, and I truly believe to this day she wanted to provide the best care. I don't think anybody comes into these types of situations with nefarious intentions.
Right.
And I don't think that she would have started this business or this company um, if she wasn't interested in providing, and dedicated to providing great care. I think it's what happens in the aftermath of that that really tells me perhaps she's not running the best business for these types of, vulnerable families and people. Um, do you have any questions before I keep going?
No, I mean, the only thing that I one of the main things I'm hearing you say is you didn't do any research. And most of us don't, because even though we know that maybe we may have to take care of an elderly grandparent, a parent, a spouse, whatever, we always think, I have tomorrow to take care of that. And then when tomorrow comes, like it did for you, and you just have to bring somebody in, you start putting out those feelers. And when you hear that familiar name, you go, this should work.
Thank God, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that is the truth. I mean, I knew I needed to get my grandma into some sort of independent living in Houston. I figured, I'll let her stay. I'll let her. She has a choice. I'll support her in staying in Houston before this whole situation happened, by her only daughter, only child still. But, I think as talking to her sisters and different things, it was best that she was outside of the house for various reasons. Not that I ever could have predicted the events that occurred.
Sure.
Um, but as you said, I'll figure it out tomorrow. I had school, I had work, I had 150 things. I didn't, transitioning somebody from Medicare to Medicaid, it's a nightmare and all sorts of different things. So, but then when I arrived at the hospital, June 12th, they were like, okay, she's ready to go. And I'm like, what do you mean she's ready to go? And so, I mean, perhaps if she was at the Cleveland Clinic, they would have been able to put me in touch with resources in the area. But um, I mean, it's a wild experience having somebody discharged with nowhere to go and not
Right.
understanding. My aunt was taking care of her like day-to-day things. So I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know who her primary care was. I didn't know any of these things. Um, and so, Nadine's company had somebody here exactly the day that I mean, we landed on a Friday at midnight and somebody was here at 9 a.m. the next day, like that, like it was terrific. And the individual that was here she seemed fine. She was young. And but I had 100 other things to do while I was home, let alone sleep. So I think that Monday I ended up going back to Houston. Um, so this care worker was here, and what really bothers me actually is that when I was given the choice of do I want an RN, and that's covered by insurance, but they don't cook, they don't clean, they don't do anything like that, or an aide, they don't refer to them as a healthcare aide or a healthcare professional or a nurse. They gave me the choice of do I want a skilled registered nurse, and I don't believe that's the rented daughter. I believe the individual I was talking to was giving me, two options,
Sure.
or an unskilled healthcare worker, which um,
I hate the term skilled and unskilled
it's quite
because
it's quite bizarre to me
right,
because they're actually doing more than the RN. I mean, I understand the RN is doing all from a healthcare standpoint, obviously they're very necessary. But I just didn't like, I mean, I think these individuals are very skilled. They're caring for an extremely vulnerable population, and their patience level is, should be remarkable. For a lot of them it is. Um, and so my grandma's a very friendly person, and so she made friends with. There was two that switched off. But day two came, and I was leaving for Houston the next day, and day two came, and I was talking to the young girl who was working with my grandma, and I had invited her up for dinner after her, shift had ended, and um, my boyfriend and I were cooking, and we were chatting, and she was complaining just about the company and about, what they were paid. Um, and again, I wasn't familiar with like this industry, but I think part of the reason, to your point, of why um, a lot of them aren't maybe the best is because there's high turnover in this industry and they're being paid $11 an hour. I mean, mind you, I was paying 25, and or I was being charged 25. I've not paid the
yeah,
invoice.
okay.
And I just there's a tremendously high turnover at even the places I visited for independent and assisted living. I mean, it's
Right.
just these people are paid. It's highway robbery. It's ridiculous. But um, so I was and she was saying how nasty Nadine was to work for, and she showed me the schedule, the handwritten schedule, because they had sent her to the wrong address the one day and or the first day, and that's why she was 30 minutes late and all sorts of different things. And so I was on a text thread with Nadine and an employee of my dad's who helped me organize this, and that's the way we communicated most of the time, other than when I've called and gotten through a few times. A lot of times it's went to voicemail. Um, and so, they were talking about these sorts of things, and then she was mentioning how the next day how she was working an overnight prior, and then she's here, and so I had put it together that this aide had worked like 38 hours to this point. And I had sent a message just, hi Nadine, I'm really concerned about the fact that so and so has worked, two overnights plus a 9 hour shift, whatever it was. And her reply was, they're allowed to work 24 hours at a time. And I said, well, okay, but let's do the math. This isn't 24 hours. We're at 36. They're caring for, a very vulnerable population of people.
Right.
And I said, quite honestly, Nadine, like, this is a major liability for you. Like if something was to happen or what I don't even think is legal, but regardless, um, she said, I can have somebody else come. I said, no, it's fine. I'll take the rest of the day. I sent the young woman home. I had asked that she was paid for the day that she was scheduled to work, because she was scheduled to work those hours, though I don't feel comfortable, but this isn't a mistake on my end. And then sometime that week I was in Houston and, multiple people were coming at the same time. Like she was set people, the schedules were just crazy. Like they were scheduling multiple people at the same time. I had wrote them. But my biggest concern was like, when I felt really bad, like sending one of them home, or I wanted them to be compensated for the mistake on, the company's end,
Right.
because they're being paid so little. And they're kind of demanding on the hours. Like they're kind of like, because I had shortened them. Like once I was trying to assess how much care was needed, I started to, okay, now I don't really need 9 to 9. I more need, 9 to 5, or whatever. And they, when I had started adjusting those, and this, I had created a full calendar, like a full calendar of like articulating what times I needed them there and what times they can go home. Never was confirmed, never was replied to. So say I had somebody coming at 11, there was somebody coming at 9. And I didn't want to pay for those hours, but I
Right.
also didn't want those people to be shorted those hours, especially at the rate that I knew they were being paid. It was really, it, it was horrible. So that was a weird um, back and forth I had with myself a lot. And so I contacted them, Nadine and her assistant, that I believe just left the company, but I contacted them multiple times, and I had said, just, um, I'm really, uncomfortable with these people coming at multiple times, but I also want them to be paid, blah, 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 blah. And there were some days that there were no replies. There were some days that there was, I'm trying to think, there probably was no replies. I can go through them, but, um, you know, there was a lack of professionalism. And finally, I just said, my grandma wasn't super thrilled with the one employee. And she said that she just sat on her phone the whole time. And so, and I had given them a credit card of mine. It was actually my personal debit card. And, just for things that she needed, and XYZ. And oh, were they shopping? And none of it was, I mean, I actually, to be honest with you, I haven't went through the receipts yet. I do not suspect that anything was negligent, because they did provide the receipts. However, I mean, they were at Macy's, and my grandma had a new rug. And so I had to send a message, just, can we try to keep these things to like $250 a week max? Like this is, I have rental furniture right now. I don't need her having a rug, you know, yeah, buy the
I
dog food,
understand. Right.
because my grandmother could probably just get carried away, I mean,
Yeah.
and she should be spoiled. She's worked her ass off her whole life, but um, you know, I'll spoil her. So anyway, there was a problem where the one wouldn't return the credit card for a few days. This is before I had let the company go. And so the other aide was helping me to get that back. And then I finally it was maybe, the week of June 30th, and I had just let Nadine know that I was no longer going to continue with Rent a Daughter, because I was just, it was too difficult with the lack of professionalism. And I said it really kindly. I just said, it's just very difficult. And I appreciate your time and what you've done for us and finding us care immediately, but we're just going to move forward with somebody else. Um, Mind you, a couple of days before that, I had reached out to her and said, "Hey, Nadine, like I haven't been invoiced for anything. Can I like when is billing? Like when?" And she said, Janine, Janine handles all billing and it will be sent out accordingly. I never received a bill until this whole situation evolved. Until after this whole situation evolved. This is what I mean. Like she had the intention to bill me. She wasn't giving me free services. Trust me, she was not giving me free services. But they're just their lack of organization. I mean, I
Right.
saw like a calendar that was just like scribbled, like, like Jamie this day, so and so this day, so and so this day. Jamie is the name of a really good employee, by the way. Um, but it was like they didn't know where they were going. That you couldn't tell if it was a 1600 or 1900 address. It was crazy. So I had let them, and she had replied to me like, I'd be willing to have a conversation to give you that professionalism that you're looking for. And I gave her like 2 more days and asked her to confirm something, and she didn't reply. So um, I just said, we don't need them anymore. So July 1st came around. I started sending my grandma to adult daycare as I looked for other care. And which, by the way, for reference, Menora Park is great with the adult daycare. They're very, very, very good. So my grandma has a lot of fun there. And for the month of July, I had went out of town for a bit. So my grandmother was staying at my dad's, and so when I was trying to get the key fob back, my grandmother's key fob. It has access to my apartment upstairs. It has access to the whole building. It has access to the garage, my grandmother's apartment. And as we know, like these employees, they have they're in our homes. And so they
Right.
have, a good understanding of, where things are. They overhear conversations. Um, you'll later understand they overheard a conversation of me on therapy with my therapist talking about my sobriety. And um, so these types of, they know that there's an old lady that's living there, what time she goes to bed, where things are kept. And so that's a little concerning. But I really didn't worry so much about that. I just really wanted the key back. And then after like week 3, I had tried really hard and the girl stopped replying. And so I called Nadine. She didn't answer. I called Nadine. She didn't answer. I called Nadine. She didn't answer. And finally, I sent a text that was just like, "This is ridiculous. I've, reached. I'm filing a police report," because the young girl had wrote me that, "Sorry, it's been so tough. And this was a week before, but my boyfriend shattered the windows of my car and blah 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 blah." And so I was like, and I was talking with my therapist, and she was like, you don't know these people, you don't know who has the key, you don't know." And I had given the girl that I'm so sorry, I'm always here for you. If you need any help, let me know. I can always come get it. Just communicate with me. Like I
Right.
have your back, girl. And that was the last of the replies. Then they started saying that um, it wasn't her phone number anymore. So that was difficult. But flash forward, I tried to get the key back. Nadine sent kind of a nasty text that she, per the terms of our contract, I'm not supposed to be communicating directly with the employees, but I'm supposed to be communicating with her. I never signed a contract. She sent me the contract. I didn't even open it. I was really busy. I was in Houston. This whole thing was 3 days fresh. I never, I never signed a contract. Didn't even read it. That's on her. She sent the care. I mean, she could have said, "Cal, you have to send the contract before I can send anyone," and I would have signed the contract.
Right.
I didn't even remember there was a contract. And I said, "I'm so sorry, but I never signed a contract." And so then she called me. I was in Washington, D.C. I go to school there, so I go there once a week. And she called me and she said, "Hi, Cal. Okay, first of all," and that was kind of how the conversation started. And I was just like blown away, um, just at the way she spoke. And it was really nasty. And that's when I knew that this wasn't going to be good, because I don't have a lot of patience anymore. Like, my patience are kind of gone. And I have to have a lot of patience during the day with my grandmother and with a lot of people. But with somebody who's so nasty, it was really difficult. And so, first of all, we waived the deposit for you, and I never asked her to do that. And, just because you didn't sign the contract, services were rendered. And so that's that. Second of all, and so just kind of how this conversation went, I was just blown away. And I said, quite honestly, Nadine, like, I'm just asking for a fob back, and you can handle that and get that back, or, you can pay for the piece to be replaced. And we argued back and forth. And finally she said, let me know how much the keys are. And so I said, I'll find out. And so they're $150 a piece. I'd have to replace all four, blah, 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 blah. Well, in the time, on that call, she did mention that, she was friends with my mother, and this is such a horrible situation for her. And she was friends with my mom, and she knows my dad. And that I hear a lot. I was friends with your mother, and it's like, it's such BS to me, because it's like, okay, my mom would have wanted her key fob back too. Like, what
Yeah,
is that?
exactly. Yeah,
And second of all, if you're friends with my deceased mother, which she wasn't, but if you're friends with her, how do you think she would want you to treat her son? You know?
exactly.
And so flash forward a half an hour, and the young healthcare worker had found out that I had told on her. And she had messaged me that am I allowed to swear on here? Is that,
Yes, you are. Yeah.
read you what it said? She had said, um, let me just make sure I have it right. It was, I said, I didn't, she said that she had told Nadine that I had offered her $17 an hour to come work for me privately, which is not true. She had asked me to, hire, she said, we can do this separate. And I said, well, that's something we can consider. I didn't read the contract. I never hired.
Right.
And I said, no, I never said that. And you came to me because Nadine was like, as a business owner, you should never, and I'm not a business owner. My dad may own a business, I don't know, but well, he does, but I'm not a business
Right.
owner. I'm in school. So the young lady said, yes, the fuck you did. Now stop texting my sister's phone. You said the police report already filed, so do what the fuck you gonna do, you little crybaby ass, faggot ass, drunk bitch. Ha ha to that. So
Wow, she's very professional.
yeah. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, this is somebody I invited into my home that like, if she's treating me like that, how is she treating my loved one?
Right.
And so I immediately just picked up the phone and I called Nadine, and I'm in tears. And I'm just like, Nadine, I want nothing to do with any of this. I want nothing to do with, and so I read her the message, and, she said, well, when am I going to be paid? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, I called Janine and she said, none of your invoices have been paid. And I said, not a single invoice has ever been sent to me. And, I referenced the group chat, and she's at that moment, I swear to God, like, invoice after invoice after invoice just shot to my email. They were all incorrect, every single one of them. She charged me for 3 weeks of July. I stopped service on June 30th. Like, the hours were completely wrong, 9 to 9, 9 to 9, 9 to 9, on days that were not worked. I had them 11 to 4. I mean, it was crazy from a lack of professionalism. Secondly, what has been said was never apologized for. She told me, you know, it's all like, people can say whatever they want. She tried to give me this like motivational advice. It was a really like, you know, I would never diagnose anybody with mental illness, but it was really an interesting shift from manic to depressive.
Yeah.
Like, so she went from, really aggressive to, I'm so sorry that this happened, but I'm losing sleep over this cow. People can say whatever they want. People can say this, but we have to, know who we are and keep our circle small. And I'm here for you. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're here for me, how are we going to make the situation right? And I'm not even talking about like a discount. That's not what I'm
Right.
talking. I don't care. But if this was me in any other situation, if somebody went into my dad's salon and I found out that they I mean, this would be like a,
It,
it's not even imaginable. If the
and
Starbucks
and
barista
in
said this to
and
you,
in today's society, I mean, we have to be honest that we all are individuals. We all want to be who we are. And it's not up to somebody to deny us of our identity. And calling us names, I mean, where's the professionalism in that? I would not want that person around my loved one, and I don't want them around me.
and I repeated, and the reason she called me a drunk bitch in this message was because she'd overheard me on therapy talking to and I'm, a year and a half sober, but I was just talking about how difficult it is to stay sober during such a stressful time. Thankfully, I have, and all sorts of different things. And it was just like so bizarre that things would be used against me that, you know, one, I should be proud of my sexuality, I should be proud of sobriety.
Absolutely.
And I had told Nadine, this is the most difficult situation I'd ever been in my entire life. And if you knew my mother, then that should speak volumes if you consider the way that she passed and that whole traumatic situation. So, you know, she didn't care. She told me that she deals with a lot of difficult situations. That's what she told me. A lot of people that have, and quite honestly, this situation is so complex that I guarantee you she's never dealt with somebody that's been shot in the head 2 times. Like
I'm
I
sure.
can't imagine, and that's still living and totally fine. Like other than her dementia, but like it's just I can't imagine. And I would love to know that person so that we could, my grandma and her could, him or her could sit down,
Right.
So um after a couple of days, I sent Nadine a message and I just let her know that because I thought about it and I called my dad and my dad is like, don't even waste your time with this negative energy. Like you're just, and he's right. But so that's when I wrote her a message that I just said, because I just said I wasn't comfortable paying for my services. I just said that, this is a hate crime and this is, if I went to, if you were a client of any business and you were spoken to this way, I mean, would you expect to pay for your Starbucks coffee if the woman in the window called you names like this or degraded you as a human being? I mean, I just can't imagine anyone would ever expect.
Right.
And Nadine sent a very nasty message that she's meeting with her lawyers and that she was, services that had already been rendered and all these things. And listen, I wasn't trying to take things to some legal, and honestly, if she came back to me and presented something that was fair, I would have totally been willing to. But it's come to the point of where I posted this on Facebook in a pretty diplomatic way.
I
Um,
agree.
but I mean, there was like 500 likes in 15 minutes, and people filled my inbox with just horrible things and experiences that they've experienced with her, with Rent a Daughter, employees of Rent a Daughter. I mean, they just were like, I was crying just at like the fact that I thought this was an isolated incident. But that's kind of why I did this podcast because I'm not, unique. I'm not saying that people have probably been called these names by their company, but what's more concerning is really the lack of care they're probably giving to a lot of very vulnerable people.
Well, what our listeners, number one, have to understand is that, and I said it in the beginning, it's not unusual that we go looking for care when it's an emergency. And whatever we can do to plan for it is important. Um, Also, you know, you need references, really good references. And, um, sometimes it's very difficult to get people to share their story like you did. Um, but I will tell you, when we had the bad care, and it was just incredible. We had put a nanny cam in my mother's room, and I was living in her apartment with her. It was a one bedroom. So, I mean, I was like right next there. But I had the nanny cam. I looked at my phone and I saw the health aide go underneath my mother's bed with a pillow and blanket and go to sleep.
Yeah, I've walked in on them taking naps.
And I know night care has to be the most difficult, time to take care of an elderly person or anybody. The house is quiet, you know, you're sitting in a room, you're listening to somebody breathing that makes you feel tired. But when I, you know, expressed my concern to the young girl, she was very belligerent with me. And so I got on the phone immediately and I called and I said, I'm sending her out of here, but I need somebody as soon as possible because there were certain things I couldn't do for my mother.
Exactly.
And-
I can't
and-
shower my grandmother. It's
right.
infuriating for her.
Yes.
And man, it's yeah,
So, again, to our listeners, you know, whatever you can do to plan for the future, that's that's something that we're all learning right here. And I'm sure you've learned that right now, Cal, as well, that, um, you know, planning is important. But what I think is even more important is for people to be professional. If you're going to be providing care for someone who may not understand what you're doing for them. And as you said, your grandmother, you know, is experiencing dementia. So one minute her mind might be clear, the next minute it may not be. And that's where the professionalism is very, very important. You are putting your trust into that company and the people that are there to take care of your grandmother. And that's why I wanted to do this because it's not just Nadine's company that does some of these things. There are many companies out there doing it. Now, there are a lot of very good companies out there. And I podcast with one, and I cannot tell you how many interviews a person has to go through to be hired by them because they want to make sure that that person is legitimate and they pay a lot more than what your people were getting paid. I mean, let's all think about it for $11 an hour, and we're taking care of somebody who may not understand what we're doing to them.
we're wiping their ass. I mean,
Yes.
they are, and they're being paid $11 an hour.
Yeah.
And that's why you're getting the employees with that she's getting. I mean, and some of them have been fine. One of them has been amazing. But I mean, I can't imagine going to sleep at night knowing that that's what she's paying her employees and for the type of job that they're carrying out. I don't, yeah.
So, as I said to you before we went online, I got this phone call right before we went to record. The person did not give me their name, would not give me their name, basically told me I shouldn't be doing this podcast. But as I said in the beginning, I have personal reasons for doing it because of the experiences I had 5 years ago. And I've done similar podcasts like this over the last 5 years. Whoever that person is, I hope they're listening to this and realize that Cal is 24 years old. He's the grandson. He's going to school. He's working. He's got a lot on his plate. And, you know, he lives a different lifestyle. But you know what? That's only his business. It's none of ours. And I mean, I've fallen in love with you. I have to tell you, you are the sweetest, nicest young man that I've met in a very long time
Thank you.
because I don't know too many that are going to go take care of grandma and run back and forth. Um, so, what do you want to get out of all this? You posted it on Facebook. I know you've contacted the other media. Um, you jumped on doing this, which I'm so grateful for. But what do you want people to have as their takeaway?
Yeah, just be confident in the people you bring into your home, right? I mean, I'm really relaxed about it. I um, have always been. I mean, anybody, caretakers, people that care for your home or housekeepers, whatever it is. Like growing up, we've always just welcomed them into our house and they sit at the table for Christmas and, all sorts of things. But you should just be really confident in the types of people that are caring at that type of level for you. And unfortunately, it can turn. But at the same time, my grandma is unharmed by all of this. So um, I I'm glad that we got out when we did. But um, yeah, I think that that's the most important thing is just, you know, doing your due diligence and having those references, as you said, things that are really hard to think about in the moment. But if someone's listening to this and in, 6 months, hopefully nothing bad happens, but at some point we need to bring in care for a loved one, just keep in mind that there are, various things to consider. Um, and these people are really important. I mean, you wouldn't want think about one day I think about who's going to be taking care of me, you know
Right.
so, or my father, or somebody else. And it's expensive, it's ridiculous. I mean, and it should be. I mean, it's important work,
Right.
but we also should get what we pay for. I mean, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy uphill battle, but I'm confident there are amazing companies that have reached out since this, and that I've considered using, and I'm very grateful for them. So
Well, like I said in the beginning, there are a lot of very good people around. I also want to give a shout out to your dad because for a son in law to take care of his
oh,
mother in law all these years, I mean, you always hear, mother in laws and son in laws don't get along. Um, and, that's really not true. My husband was very close to my mother as well. But that just shows how you were brought up. And so, again, whoever that person was who called me, who tried to imply that this was just going to be a story, even if it is, guess what? It shouldn't have been played out this way. So,
yeah.
I want to thank you so much.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate you and for this, and I look forward to listening to a lot of your different podcasts.
well, we certainly appreciate it. And I will be in touch soon. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk soon. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye now.